All right, welcome once again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. And we're going to start today with hopefully Samo pouring some white lightning of hope and happiness onto my brain, because I am not in a good place. And let me kind of get around to why I'm not in a good place. Um, so I wanted to talk last week about September 11th for obvious reasons. And life got in the way. I may or may not talk about why. So we didn't get around to it, but it's probably a good thing, maybe, uh, because in listening and watching all the September 11th stuff over that weekend, and then even, during part of the week, a thought occurred to me because one of the recurring phrases that was used by people all over the spectrum about 9/11 when they were talking about it was, some variation of, this was a turning point. I knew things were never going to be the same. America would never go back to normal, something like that. And a thought occurred to me. Why? Because in a historical context, when it comes to pushing us into a war, the surprise of it, and even the body count, 9/11 is very analogous to Pearl Harbor. And yet, after World War II, America basically went back to what it was. The only really significant change was it shocked us out of our isolationism. And not only the government, but the public at large realized that we have to be more proactive in the world space so that we don't once again have another massive conflict where millions upon millions of people are killed. That was the only significant change, but for the most part, America went back to normal. And I meant to pull this up, but it was too depressing. Because I heard somebody talking about one of the Marines that was killed in the suicide bombing in Kabul as they were evacuating, and it was only 20 years old. And and I thought about that those 13 men that were killed, most of them wouldn't have been old enough or even alive yet when September 11th happened. And a lot of the people talking about September 11th kept talking about September 12th, wanting to get back to that or remembering back to that day after when we were unified, when politics was set aside. I don't think it was, but when politics was set aside, and we all embraced each other on the general principle of we are American, we are America, we are Americans, and we're going to come together to help those who have been affected by this and aggressively go find the people who perpetrated this. But I think that's the wrong outlook. I think we need to go back. I think we need to look to September 10th. And
Okay.
that's what is so damn depressing, is that these men who died in Kabul, who were the last casualties, the last military casualties of the war in Afghanistan, they never knew the America that they were fighting for. Because the America of September 12th is not the same as the America of September 10th, 2001. And we are getting farther and farther and farther and farther away from that America. Even just, the basic things of you can't walk your loved one to the gate and give them a hug goodbye as they board a plane. Something as simple as that, but that is just kind of a symptom of the deeper sickness, which is, as Benjamin Franklin put it, those who would trade liberty for security deserve and will have neither. And we've done that. And we've gotten more and more and more used to trading away our individual liberty because we don't want the individual responsibility. Uh,
Uh,
I'll pause there if you have any thoughts.
well, I guess my real only thought on that is it's a testament to the fact that you can't give something up to the government thinking it's going to be temporary. And we can pull this all the way to COVID
Mhm.
nowadays. The more you give up, they're not going to give it back once they have it. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? And we're still going. So after 9/11, as I wasn't as into it as you were as far as following the politics behind it. But yeah, we came out with the Patriot Act, which is the exact opposite of its name. And,
Yeah, I'm so cynical. I think you could legalize rape if you called it a civil rights act. We are that dumb.
oh, we might have to get on that with some of the social stuff because you're not far off,
Yeah.
you know. But just call it a social justice cause or call it public health, and you can
Mhm.
almost get away with anything right now, as we've seen. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. The dynamic that is the United States of America and what we had as our freedoms back then, we're forever changed. I mean, we're going to be in a battle here soon fighting a Patriot Act 2.0 because of domestic terror in January 6th. And winning that battle is it's sad that that's going to be, yay, we don't have more surveillance. It's when we really should be trying to pull back what occurred
Mhm.
back then. And in fact, when you talk domestic terror, and you throw this thought out there, the people who actually would fit the bill are fighting the surveillance state. So they wouldn't even exist in large part without that expansion of power. Make the problem you say you're going to solve.
Right. And you're demonstrating why this is a bipartisan issue because you mentioned the Patriot Act, which um the left primarily, and then some of the farther right, the more libertarian right, were opposed to the Patriot Act and talking about the problems with the Patriot Act. But for most of, middle left to middle right America, no, it's called the Patriot Act and we have to do something about all this. Let's kind of forget about the details of the act. Let's just get her done. And I give credit to Louis Gohmert, who's a representative from Texas, and he came out after all of the domestic NSA spying was revealed in Obama's first term. I was listening to an interview where he apologized and he named names to specific people of my colleagues in the Democratic Party who talked to me specifically and warned me specifically about the problems with the Patriot Act, and I ignored them. I said, no, that's not going to happen. No, this is America. It can't happen here. And he had a big mea culpa and said, I'm sorry, we messed up and we need to fix this. And he kind of made some moves to do that. But then the Republicans as a whole completely forgot about it when Trump was elected. And while Obama was in office, the Democrats who were opposed to the Patriot Act completely forget that they were opposed to the Patriot Act when Obama was in office.
Well, and this is bipartisan because if you can kind of switch the thinking on it, are you Republican or Democrat, or are you liberty or authoritarian?
Mm-hmm.
And the left, the authoritarian left, is about 8% of the population. The authoritarian right is about 7% of the population. And because the middle is so afraid of both of those, they keep dividing right down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And you were right; it was the liberal left that fought the Patriot Act. But that authoritarian left was looking at it going, we're going to use this later. And that's why you have to be careful when you give authority to the government, because anytime you add authority, the authoritarians have more power to keep it, whether they're right or left.
Well,
and be careful what you do now, because it will be used against you later. Just like that's the fear with the Democrats that will not support getting rid of the filibuster, is because they're like, this will be used against us if we do this. We need that as a tool later for our own purposes. which is great. I'm glad some people are standing up for it.
And that's where my pessimism and depression of the weekend comes from, is getting caught up on the news, which I hadn't been paying attention to, and combined with this thought of what the America of 9/10/2001 was. You brought up COVID, and we're going to go more into that later. And the America of September 10th, 2001 never would have accepted the authoritarian restrictions that we have been under for well over a year. We probably would have gone along with the 2 weeks to flatten the curve, because
that was the best decision at the time.
We didn't have a lot of information.
Yeah.
We were worried nobody wants to accidentally kill grandma. Okay. But then when it kept going and going and going, I kept expecting more and more people to stand up and say, come on, enough's enough. Enough's enough. And instead, people just became more entrenched and made it more and more political, to the point where, so one of the things that really infuriated and depressed me was the Biden administration just a week ago saying, we're going to double the monoclonal antibody production and delivery to the states. And then a week later, they come out and say, well, we're concerned about equity. We want a more equitable distribution. And it just is a mere coincidence that the people who are having their monoclonal antibody receipts halved are red states. Complete coincidence.
Yeah. Well, and did we bring up the map of minority distribution in the U.S.?
Yeah, we've talked about that, and that's a good point. Of if you are so pro-vax, and they have said this, the administration and then just regular people who are condemning anyone who's vaccine hesitant have talked about, well, if you don't get the vaccine, then you don't deserve the treatment. Okay, well, fine. Then instead of just cutting off red states because you think it's a red state, blue state issue, what about inner city minorities? There is an incredibly high proportion. The percentage of the Black and Hispanic population who are unvaccinated far outweighs the percentage of the white population. And as we've talked about, for good reason, because you've been telling them for years, don't trust the man, he's out to get you.
Yeah, I'm looking up the map. It's in his book. I need to just probably scan it in. But the red states, people have a skewed view because of big cities like Philadelphia or Minneapolis or something, of where minorities are in the country. But it's a belt along the South.
Well, while you're
which
looking
are mostly
that up,
red states is
what it made
my
me
point.
think of, what I immediately thought of with this news about a cutting off, for crying out loud, you're literally killing people. You have been cranking the fear knob up to 11 with COVID, and now all of a sudden you're cutting off what is probably the most effective treatment we have right now to a disease that you have said is so dangerous that we have to completely change the way we live and our conception of liberty in America.
Well, remember, we can't have a treatment.
Yeah, by your own words, you are killing people.
Yeah,
and this is, I brought up an article in one of our first podcasts, and I've mentioned it before, when the United States government killed thousands of people through poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Because the thought was, hey, this is illegal anyway. And they killed thousands of people with alcohol poisoning through poisoned alcohol. This is exactly the same. It can't happen here. It is. And this piles onto, I don't know if you heard Nancy Pelosi. I was going to get a clip of this, and then I decided I want to go deeper into this later, because I want to go deeper into China. Nancy Pelosi is in Britain at a climate change conference, I think is what it is, because that's what she was talking about. She admitted The Speaker of the House admitted that what China is doing to the Uyghurs and the Muslim, who are Muslim minorities, for anyone who doesn't know, Muslim minorities in Western China, is genocide. And it is. By definition, what China is doing to the Uyghurs is genocide. Nancy Pelosi admitted that. She used the word genocide and then used the word but. But climate change is really important, so we have to work together on that. I try not to use this word, and I've been trying more and more to use less extreme language and to not assume motives. That's evil. There's no other word for that. And if you think that's an exaggeration, then consider this. Well, yeah, we know that Hitler is exterminating millions of Jews and Slavs and political prisoners, and he's committing genocide. But we have to work together to on climate change. We have to work together to stop the Soviet Union. We have to work together to create the Autobahn, because the interstate highway system will transform America. Can you imagine? Well, that's exactly what it is, which is why I've always hated the phrase never forget, which is used in the context of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
We have forgotten. We forgot when that happened. The first basically
how it happened.
Yeah.
Because the narrative is evil Adolf Hitler hated Jews, had 100% control of the army, and they did his bidding. No, there's you forget the process how he got control of the army. If you go by that narrative, you have to assume everybody in that army was equally as evil as him.
And it wasn't just, one guy or a handful of guys. It took a lot of stone-hearted people to make the Holocaust happen. And that's an important part of the story. But in a historical concept, what infuriates me is that we're always forgetting. So what is basically, I've mentioned that you can make a case that the first genocide occurred in the French Revolution, which you can make a case is the first fascist regime ever. But by and large, the first official genocide was Turkey's attempted extermination of the Armenian Christians during World War I. You're not even allowed to call that a genocide unless or you're going to piss off Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
We're still 100 years later arguing about whether or not that was a genocide when, it's hard to figure out the numbers, but probably 1 to 3 million Armenian Christians were killed by Turkey during this period. We forgot before the Holocaust, and then we've forgotten after the Holocaust. What was the Khmer Rouge doing if not a genocide? Rwanda, that was a genocide. It happens over and over, and we're constantly forgetting, and now we're saying it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that pushes America off the cliff. We've been running headfirst towards the cliff ever since 9/11. And to me, cutting off treatment for a disease that you have claimed is so deadly that we have to completely change the way we live our lives, and admitting that genocide has happened, but we're going to work with these people, we're off the cliff.
Well, I told you I was listening to that lecture, the biology lecture yesterday on aggression, and part of it was about the prefrontal cortex and its role in these situations. And it's a perfect example of someone who has serious deficiency, we'll say deficiency in the prefrontal cortex, whether it's from trauma or just the way she was raised or something genetic or whatever the cause of it is. Someone with that degree of damage can say, well, these are the rules, but I'm still going to do it without a second thought. And it's not, I want to break the rules. It's, I just want this thing. And it's there, I'm going to get it. Oh, I can explain to you the rules. And then even later go, oh, I did the wrong thing. Or no, let me rephrase that. If you ask them, how do you do it the right way and how do you do it the wrong way? They can explain to you up and down what the right way and the wrong way is, but they still did it the wrong way themselves because X was on the other side of what they wanted. And it truly is some sort of, I mean, we know that at that level of government, everybody's either some sort of narcissistic personality disorder or some sort of socio or psychopath at that point. And Nancy Pelosi, I mean, you just look at the decisions she makes, there is no empathy behind any of it. Now she feigns it, she obviously does, but we could go down a rabbit hole of mental disorder here, but it takes some degree of that to get to that level. Trump is an extreme example of the overt narcissist, right? The problem is you got to, when we're looking at our figures, we got to almost accept that fact. But there are some that can be productive, and there are some that can do it for their own gain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And how does that person's mental disorder benefit our country, right? Or how can it get in the way of that? And we see a little bit of both on those two extremes of the spectrum. Biden's another example. He's always been an opportunist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why my fight with the lefties that I would talk to, the liberal lefties, the good lefties, but that still supported Biden. And of course, we had some good talks back and forth. It was under the guise that it's going to get back to the old way with him, whereas it wasn't that the dementia that scared me. It was the fact that his old way has always been an opportunist way. He jumped on whatever would get him the most prestige, the most look at me, the most I did this, look at the crime bills of the 80s and 90s. And he would keep switching position to do that. So they were like, he's not going to usher in this new left because he's old school. And I'm like, no, he's going to usher in the new left because that's where power lies right now.
That's what the Democratic Party has become.
Mm-hmm.
And that's you brought up Trump. That's the frustration with both the left and the right that we've talked about, is that neither side is willing to recognize that what they're pointing out, they're the mirror image of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I'm trying to think if I bookmarked it, but there is a study just released on the psychological makeup of the authoritarian left versus the authoritarian right. And all the individual aspects of the psychological profile were the same. They just had a different idea of how it should be done.
That's intriguing. Well, while you're rummaging around for that, what made me think of this was your talk about Biden. Is you're absolutely right. If you go back and look at Biden's, pronouncements and voting history all the way back from when he was first elected in the age of Methuselah, and the left has been so busy for years screeching that the right is extreme, that the Republican Party has become extreme, that they have paid absolutely no attention to how extreme their own party has become. And so anyone who was being objective and trying to stand back and take a look at things would have seen exactly what was happening, which is that even though the Democratic Party voters have not become extreme, the extreme of the voting population has grown, but for the most part, as you say, it's 8-ish%. For the most part, the Democratic voters are still just left of center, but the party has become extreme. And the people who are so afraid of the right that they're not paying attention to what their own selves are doing didn't notice that our party is extreme. And we've just elected someone who has no inner core except power and money for himself. So he's going to go whichever direction the popular party is going, the party apparatus is going. And the party apparatus is radical left.
All right, here we go. It was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And the author said, we always looked at it from the point of conservatives. and he wanted to look at the psychological profiles. And I'm just quick browsing over just some key points that I think are interesting. Top-down censorship, that they have those in common. The anti-hierarchical aggression. So this is I'll link this article. It's a good little read. And it kind of just lends credence to what we've been talking about the whole time. They're just looking at a mirror at each other, and we're stuck in the middle. The problem is we're a two-party system. So if you're afraid of one side, you're on the other. And if you're afraid of the other side, so if you're afraid of the extreme left, you're on the right. If you're afraid of the extreme right, you're on the left. I'm afraid of both of them.
Yeah.
As we all should be.
It's why I have just absolutely no hope for the future, near or long term, because we are letting, this is why I started off talking about mob psychology, the psychology of the mob, and how we let ourselves be led. And then what's scarier is then what you have added to the talk about psychology of how we can train ourselves. So you mentioned people who have, you know, kind of legitimate, for lack of a better word, psychological disorders. Well, people who don't have those disorders can train themselves to act that way, you know, through repetition, through mental exercises and routine that push them into a rut of bad behavior, because they can't.
There's also the fact that
think of anything else,
that clinical sociopaths and clinical antisocials, we'll lump them all together, actually are very good. They can't. They're bad at reading empathy or having it themselves, but they're good at acting, because they learn at a young age that they get more for showing these things. And so they're really good at displaying this emotion that they don't have and can't see in others very well. I don't know where we were going with that, but it's something to add to what you were saying.
Well,
yeah.
Where I was going with that is you've got these 7 or 8% extremes on either side, but then you've got that large chunk of sensible people in between who are letting themselves be led, letting themselves be manipulated, and then training themselves to move farther to the extremes rather than
I'm going to say they're being
center.
trained. That's where cognitive dissonance comes in, because we're being conditioned. Like, here's we go back to the 9/11 thing. You're talking about the young man that died. He probably wasn't even alive during the original 9/11, or very, very, very young. His whole life, he lived in the society that was post. He probably couldn't even imagine a freer society than he grew up in, because it never existed for him. So he's conditioned, and we've got 20 years of that conditioning ourselves, where those of us that are fighting the power grabs now would be ecstatic to just keep what we had. When in reality, if you really dig down deep, we should be flowing a little bit the other way. Again, I can't go full libertarian, but they do have a shit ton of great points. So,
but at some point there is an element of personal responsibility, and I guess coming from the right, the example I just thought of would be how many people in 2015, 2016 on the right were opposed to Donald Trump for very legitimate philosophical reasons. But then as the political atmosphere became more divided, more extreme, more agitated, they drifted farther and farther until they became, you know, enthusiastic, not grudging, because there were some people even then, like, oh, I'm drawing a blank on some of the big names, who said, look, I still don't like him, but as a transactional event, I'm going to vote for him because the benefits outweigh the costs, in my opinion, even though I still don't like him. But so much of the right has become enthusiastic supporters of Donald Trump rather than grudging supporters of Donald Trump. And there's a large element of that that's on you. You cannot let yourself be led. You have to have some mental fortitude and some intellectual honesty to pull yourself back from that crowd of lemmings that's rushing forward towards the cliff.
Well, and therein lies the problem, because just as a matter of numbers, is most people are more easily led versus not easily led. Now, in the United States, that curve is shifted to the less easily led, versus like somewhere like China, that has been a communal society for a long time, even before they were communist. I actually wanted to have a discussion on communal societies versus liberty-seeking societies in general, because there's an underlying genetic reason why the United States is the way it is, and somewhere like China is the way it is when it comes to community versus more individualist societies. But so that's a long talk. We'll tease that, because you can start. I'll give you my points and then we'll go on. But so our bell curve is a little bit shifted to the freedom, but as people in general, as human beings, it can't be sustainable for everybody to be a leadership quality type person in a society, or we'd always be fighting because we'd always want to be the leader. And so now as the US, we have to keep going back to an individualist mindset, which is where you're going, because that's personal freedoms, but also find the leaders that are going to lead us in that direction. And that's where the quality of information, the disconnect with quality of information is really killing us right now, because we don't know. The message is so static that you've got this group of people over here with their information saying this is the right way, and this group of people over on the other side with their information saying this is the right way. And then we're in the middle here trying to go, no, this is where the real information on this topic is. And we piss off one side. And oh no, on topic B, here's the real information here, and here's the rhetoric, and then we piss off the other side. So that's where I think the information highway needs to be fixed, not necessarily the fact that we're leaders or followers. Most people are followers. We just need clear information on where they need to go.
Right. And because so much of our leadership class is frankly greedy for power and greedy for money. So
Well,
they don't care about what's going on, because they figure it's not going to be I have made myself so wealthy that I can be insulated from whatever fallout there is, and or when the shit hits the fan, I'm going to be gone. So somebody else's problem.
well,
And
what people don't realize is in the United States, all this talk about equity, all the COVID stuff and the riotous stuff, the social justice movements, has actually created the biggest income gap in the United States we've had in a long time. Look at the housing market. What are we up, like 30%, 40% on housing prices? And what wealthier people are doing are buying these houses for cash, and for lots of different reasons, to rent them out. So you're creating a rent class. You're eliminating the middle class because they can't afford the higher priced houses. And they're also using it for generational income. So the rich person buys kid home, and now you've bypassed a few estate tax laws, and kid has home, and the best way to have generational income is to start with is home buying. And so
Property, yeah.
you've given them you've given them the boost. Remember the little equity cartoon with the Biden Harris campaign, where the one guy was on top and the other guy was down there with the rope, and it wasn't, and then they ended up at the top together because of their equity program. Well, we've just extended that gap,
Mhm.
and it's not white and black. It's poor versus elite, poor person versus upper class. Uh, Nicole and I went through a lot of, we ran through sand to get where we are, from very low income, poor students, to doing pretty damn well for ourselves. And I cannot imagine doing that now versus,
Yeah.
we started that process really about 2005 together, 2006 together. So we barely made it through that in the environment that was pre-COVID, uh, the last couple of years. And I couldn't imagine trying to do it now, because home prices are so high, rent is so high, medical costs are so high, everything.
So I haven't looked this up. I didn't have a source for this ready because I wasn't planning on talking about this, but you just made me think of a stat I saw a couple weeks ago that
Well, let me pause us and take a bathroom break, and you can look for something if you need to find it.
Okay. So I decided I don't want to get bogged down in that data. I want to just kind of briefly mention what I was going to say and skip
we
to my
kind of went off on
conclusion.
a different direction than we had
Yeah.
originally planned
Well,
anyways.
What you made me think of was a stat from a couple weeks ago. Now, way back in like our first COVID episode, I talked about and I showed the data of not just job loss, but business closings during the shutdown. At the same time, there were like a couple dozen new billionaires during the COVID lockdown. So that just adds to the extreme of your point of that gap widening while the middle gets squeezed down. And my worry is, kind of my conclusion of all this pessimism and cynicism and depression of these points I'm mentioning is I am very concerned that we're heading towards a John Brown moment. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, there's actually a pretty good, I think it's on Showtime. I haven't had a chance to watch full episodes, just lots of clips of, oh crap, I just brain farted. It's like The Lord Bird, and it's got a weird title because it comes from a book about John Brown, who is credited by a lot of historians as being the chief spark that started the Civil War, because he tried to instigate a slave rebellion in the South, starting in Virginia by seizing a federal armory. And he was a radical, and he was kind of a nut. No, not kind of nut. He was a nut, and he did some pretty horrible things. He kind of got his start fighting when Kansas and Nebraska were going to be led into the Union, as per the usual, because this has been going on for a long time. Rather than making a hard decision itself, Congress punted and just booted the issue and said, well, we'll allow these new territories to vote for themselves whether they're going to be free or slave. So what happened is bunches of people from both sides rushed in and they just started fighting. And it got bloody and brutal and savage. John Brown in particular hacked to death a number of pro-slavery people with broadswords. So it was downright medieval. But he'd been pushed there because for decades, the Civil War didn't happen overnight. For decades, the country had been arguing about slavery, and Congress had continued to just punt the issue down the field until finally people snapped. As we've been talking about, you let yourself get trained, you let yourself get led, or you get pushed by bad actors or just apathetic people in power, people who care more about their position than about doing the right thing, even if it's hard. And people are going to snap. And historically, the radical left has been more violent than the radical right. That's just a fact. People can say, oh, abortion bombings, there's like a handful. Oh, Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh was a nut. And if you look at
Well,
his
let me qualify
pronouncements.
that though. In number, the left
Mm,
has
mm.
been more violent. In effectiveness,
Well, I'm just talking about in America.
yeah.
I'm talking about just in America.
I mean, Timothy McVeigh in effect on the country is equivalent to all summer.
Yeah, but people call him right because he was part of a militia. But if you actually look at what he said, what he believed, you can make an argument that he was on the left. At best, you can say he was kind of apolitical. He was just a radical nut who hated the government.
Okay,
But
continue.
even if you call him right, again, those are sparks, or those are flashes through the last 100 and something years. Because I'm going all the way back to the early 1900s when you had what were called radical anarchists. And you think anarchy, well, that's a radical libertarian, except they weren't. What the anarchists of the early 1900s were communists. Their anarchy, explicitly from their own admissions, their anarchy was to destabilize the system so that it crashes and we can create communism. And you see, that's a lot of what's happening on the left now. My worry is that eventually people on the right, because we've talked about the psychology of left versus right, it's just people who are more on the right are less inclined to these kinds of actions. They're inclined to other kinds of actions that can be bad. I'm not saying one side is better than the other. I'm just saying temperamentally, they're less inclined to these kinds of violent actions. My concern is that they are being pushed purposefully, being pushed to violence to create excuses for the left to grab more power. And the left too. The left is pushing itself.
Oh, well, we see that with the Whitmer case, which is an example of was becoming a very public example
Mhm.
of what's been going on since the original Patriot Act,
Yep.
where certain entities, FBI, is actually instigating actions, and then policymakers are using those actions to create more authority within the government. So again, biggest threat to the nation is white supremacist domestic terrorists. Well, we have a case where, oh, we were egging on domestic terror. We can't call them white supremacists because we don't know, but they were a militia group that was pretty much doing nothing until the FBI went there and started convincing them to do things.
That's what I was referring to. I wasn't going to go into the details because I want to spend a whole segment on that later and bring up all the sources. But it was like the group Sam's referring to, it was like 12 FBI agents, informants, and 14 militia members. The FBI nearly outnumbered these militia lunatics.
Mm-hmm.
We're being pushed. And at some point, I'm more and more convinced that at some point, the right, there are going to be enough people on the right who snap, like legitimately, not, you know, not people on the left who are egging this on. Like you brought up the guy who, on January 6th, way back, you brought up the guy who was a leftist who was in there filming it and sold his video to CNN.
John Sullivan.
Yeah. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking like legitimate people on the right who are just going to snap.
Well,
and
there were some of those. The two Duck Dynasty guys, the QAnon man.
That's what I'm talking about. Like the guy who went in with a rifle into this pizza parlor because he had been convinced by lunatics who I shall not name because I despise them, that there was a pedophile ring a literal underground pedophile ring in Washington, D.C. And he thought he was going to save the children. He legitimately thought he was going to save a third party, and he terrified these people. Can you imagine if he hadn't gone in there shouting and making demands and had just gone in opening fire? Well, I'm more and more worried we're going there. People have completely forgotten, because it doesn't fit the narrative, that one of the most egregious acts of domestic terror that has happened recently was when the Bernie bro, literally, he was a volunteer for the Bernie campaign, went and shot up the softball practice of the
Mhm.
GOP, he very nearly assassinated something like a fifth of the GOP. I mean, it really is that he was such a crappy shot is the only reason that there was one major injury
And see,
and no
that's why I say
fatalities.
the right wing extremists are more effective. They're good shots. You know?
And I mean, you're partly joking, but you're right, and that's my
Yeah.
worry is that when people on the right snap, things are going to get uglier than they have been since 1860.
It- I think that's underlying reason that I really wanted to get something like this going, because there has to be some voice that's like trying to bring back the reason, because there's going to be the jerks on both sides,
Mhm.
and we've got to counter that voice some way somehow, and how much we're going to be limited on that is sucks because of big tech, but yeah, it's to stop that slide to the right as well. But I think we kind of exhausted this topic though.
I think we have. I'll end with my own tease of something that we'll go into the future because you talked about the psychology of communitarian versus individualistic.
Mhm.
My tease of what I want to get into is what you were just talking about with the FBI, and we're gonna take a deep dive into the sources here of not just the FBI but some other government agencies and the shenanigans they're up to. And I'll tease by saying, as much as I have lambasted this whole time Donald Trump and his supporters, what's going on here could actually make me vote for Trump if he runs in 2024.
Ooh, let's just hope.
I hope it doesn't come to that because right now, well, actually, I kind of do hope it comes to that because right now I'm voting for Sweet Meteor of Death.
And like I told you last night via text, we can't do that because we both have kids.
Well,
Uh,
it let's move on to some non-political stuff now.
well, I want to tease what
Okay.
where I want to contribute something else to that conversation, because you were talking about the FBI,
Uh-huh.
and I've been real deep in with the postmodern movement and the radical left, the activist movement, and their motives plus their strategy. And what that really made clear as I dove deeper and deeper and deeper into it was our buddies at the CDC and the DOJ have been, or Bureau of Justice, have been activist movements for quite some time now too. And you look through their publications on their own sites and their data analysis that people cite for these social journals and social justice causes, that they've been a social justice activist organization for quite some time. And I could go through and show you some, because when you look at mathematical models, which is what they use, like 1 in 3 women is sexually assaulted sometime in their life. Well, when you look at something like that, but it doesn't match the crime data, then there's some sort of assumption made at some point in time, which is how many are unreported or et cetera. And so we call those, in a mathematical model, we call them the bodies, the assumptions. Somewhere along the way, if we're making a model, we don't have data yet because we're predicting the future. So you have to make some sort of assumptions. And when we look at the way the CDC and the DOJ, Bureau of Justice Statistics, has been working, they've been using the worst possible assumptions when it comes to race and sex and trans and pick your social justice movement to further that cause for quite some time now, even before 2010, which is where the big explosions happened. But that kind of plays into it because you can't have an explosion unless you have previous publications. So yeah, that you can focus on the FBI, even though I brought up Whitmer and everything, and we can bring in all these other ones, and that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to trust the CDC now when we needed them the most.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get deeper into that, but now I think after I've depressed everybody and myself even more, we should go to what's over your left shoulder
Yeah.
and
So
kind of jump away from politics for a little bit.
what's over my left shoulder? Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yep.
This left. If those that actually have patience enough to have been watching us notice I cringe every time I've been moving my right arm to use my mouse or type. We had a little oopsie in the gym on Tuesday. I was in here lifting with my normal lifting partner who played professional baseball for a while, and then his buddy who was a former pro defensive lineman. So he's quite large athletic individual. And we had a great warm up. We were in the sets and everything was going good. And whether it was adrenaline of the moment or a lot of other things, and I'm going back over my programming to make sure, the mistakes that were made along the way, but I completely ruptured my right pectoral muscle away from the bone. And we can get a visual on this here. So this is your pectoralis major. Now there's two insertions to the arm. One connects your collarbone to the arm, and the other connects your sternum to the arm. And both of those make up the same muscle called the pectoralis major. And well, I originally thought I just tore one of them, but the MRI result says the answer is yes, they're both gone.
Oh no.
So the whole thing is ripped away, and whatever I'm feeling that feels like it's connected has to be some sort of referred pain or nerve ending or something. So the whole thing is ripped apart, and the muscle is bunched along here. Not too bad because the connective tissue that attaches to the ribs, which we all have just sticky connective tissue all over anyways, is held up some. So they're going to be able to pull that back. And this Tuesday, I'll be going in for the surgery where they're going to anchor it in. And for those that want a visual, this is my right shoulder here.
Man boob.
Yeah. So you can see the muscle just kind of hanging there, which is not attractive. But
as
also,
I said, you look like a 60-year-old wrestler and the roids are wearing off.
yeah, but you can see the connection. Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
There? All right. So you see the connection makes a nice smooth line, and there's that attachment point in the arm. From this, that would be the clavicular one, and then up here would be the sternal one. But you see there's a nice little divot right there where that should be. Sorry, I wanted to bring up thumbnails later. Where's the new ones? Hold on, I might have to open something else over here. There we go. And here's the bruising. Obviously nothing damaged down here, but gravity pulls it down. But also I found out that per the MRI that I have a second grade tear of the deltoid as well. So that's probably contributing, but that's still connected. So that will get better with rest, which I will get plenty of, because once I have the surgery, I will be locked in a brace for 6 weeks on that side.
Yikes.
So that's going to be more than sufficient rest for that. Now, where we wanted to go with this was be a training talk, because I did find some errors in programming, and it's quite a bit nuanced, and it's an error that I'd say 95% of trainers would make, and I shouldn't have made. And when we look at programming, we're going to look at a microcycle, which would be a week. So I do a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday lift. And I was trying to play around and change things up, because I do the same program that I have my advanced fitness clients do, which is just the Aging Badass program. But they've been with me for, I think the shortest running client is 5+ years. So, I want to keep it interesting, so I change the splits up and try to work on some different things here and there. And what I was doing was we were going to do main lift is Monday squat, Tuesday bench, Thursday dead, Friday push press, overhead push press. And I needed secondary lifts along the way. And as natural lifters, you need to hit everything kind of twice a week or more to get the max benefit, because you can't have the same volume within a day as a bodybuilder and then have an anabolic window long enough as someone, by say bodybuilder, as an enhanced bodybuilder, chemically enhanced bodybuilder, and have an anabolic window that's extended because of those chemical enhancements to keep repairing that tissue over time. So that's why I hate the body part splits you see in muscle and fitness back in the 80s, is you've got, Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, do all of the, these 50 sets of shoulder exercises on this day and 45 sets of chest on this day. And well, yeah, he's got a longer healing time because he's not going to hit that chest till the next time around, a week later, but his anabolic window is extending to that because he's pumping in extra testosterone. And nowadays they're pumping in a cocktail of testosterone, growth hormone, and other anabolic agents. So we as natural lifters need to hit them a little more often. So I played with the splits to get a little bit of a total body workout every day. And I needed a pulling exercise for Monday to going into Tuesday because our focus is bench press.
Mhm.
And so, okay, cool. Pull, push, you can do those back-to-back days. Simple. 95% of trainers can figure that part out, right? Well, a percentage of those 95%, because some are just stupid, but most people can figure that out. Okay, pull and a push, you're okay. But that's where it was surface level, and you had to analyze really what you were throwing in there. And so my thought was, well, some people are still trying to work towards doing a real chin up versus an assisted chin up with a band or something along those lines. And typically a chin up is easier than a pull up. Pull up would be an overhand grip, chin up would be a reverse grip.
Yep.
Well, I'd like everybody to do a little, who's following along here, a little simple test you can do. Put your arm up, overhand, poke into your pec, and then pull down, and you'll feel nothing happens. Nothing happens right there. It's all back muscles and biceps, forearm, posterior shoulder. All right. Chest is almost inactive, period, except to maybe assist in holding your rotator cuff in place. All right. Turn your hand around, do that same motion. Oh, it flexes all of a sudden. In fact, it flexes quite considerably. So the hand position actually changes everything, because here, no stretch of the pec. It's not going to be a prime mover at all. It's as loose as you can get. But then turn it over and you externally rotate the humerus. All of a sudden that pec is a major player because it has to rotate that arm down to get in place. Well, there was my mistake, because the day before we did those chin ups and it was a little bit heavier because I was trying to wean people off the bands. So sets of 5, and I may have gotten some numbers from some friends of mine on what they were doing. So I had to outdo them. And so I had two plates hanging from me. So 90 extra pounds for the last 2 sets, 5 easy. Then the second set, I did the 5, and then did a couple, wanted to get a little more out of it. So I got it to the top and then lowered down real slow. Of course, that's as high as I can get that arm, but lowered down real slow, which is what we call an eccentric rep, which is where you get the most tissue damage. And so I did 2 reps like that with 90 extra pounds to my close to 200-pound body weight. And that was the day before the bench. So now we've got pec activation, eccentric reps, heavily loaded eccentric reps, lots of tissue damage. Well, in a singular workout, so say I did bench and chin ups on the same day, fatigue creates an environment where you're basically protecting the tissues, because I would have lacked performance on one of those 2 exercises. But because I did them back-to-back days, I've got the tissue damage, the next day being the most vulnerable time for that tissue damage, because it's the initial inflammation is done. Fatigue is recovered because of post-workout meal and sleep, right? So fatigue is recovered. Tissue damage is still there because it takes time to heal. And we get a neurological effect, which is called supercompensation. And so those chest fibers are in a great state to create a lot of force because they've got energy back and they're in this neurological state of supercompensation. So I was banging it on that bench press. In fact, I threw up. We got to that last set and was like, you know what? I'm going to try for a new best. And we put 255 on there, and the sets were 5, but I was going to go for 6, which would have been my new best because I'd done it for 5 one time. And first rep, like nothing. Second rep, my spotter was a football player, and he said, "Oh my gosh, you're going to get 8 reps." And the third rep, right after he said that, off my chest, and I kind of look at my elbows when I go anyways because I'm used to lifting alone, and I watched it just, and it actually didn't hurt. Pop a knuckle and then times like 50. So that feeling times 50, and I felt that pop and just saw it roll up. And I don't remember dropping the bar on me, but the spotter said he caught it off the rebound, not caught it in air.
That's a little bit dangerous.
So I'm glad I don't have a broken rib on top of that. But yeah, as soon as he pulled that weight off me, which again, luckily I had a big giant spotter because he just picked it up like it was nothing and put it on the rack. But I got up, went down, and again, it wasn't pain. It was the knowledge.
Why doesn't my arm work?
No, it was the knowledge of knowing exactly what happened. I knew I torn my pec. I didn't know how extreme, but I knew it was away from the bone. I knew it was surgical. I knew it was about a 6-month recovery. I knew that I'm going to be psychologically damaged anytime I do bench press for the near future, or any chest exercise. And so all of these things, I knew all the things I couldn't do anymore, like mow the lawn for the next, 12 weeks at least, so the implications of it went through my mind immediately, including this is going to be fucking expensive. And we just had our dog in the doggy ER too, because he sliced his leg open. And
have you figured out how yet?
No, I haven't figured out where he's done it. I've been looking all over, but and so officially, by the way, the vet costs more than the regular doctor because I paid more for his leg than I did for my chest. And I think I'm done with the payments now, except for furthering PT. So, but it was all of that. But the programming, you got to think beyond push pull. You got to think beyond chest back. You got to think beyond all of these things. And you got to really break down the motions, especially when you get to the high power, high force stuff. So had I done that chin up set on Friday after doing the bench on Tuesday, everything would have been fine. Because Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I'm past that stage of tissue damage versus supercompensation and all of that. So it was a situation where my programming was flawed, but it wasn't surface level flawed. It was flawed in the fact that so on Monday, had I done it with an overhand grip, I would have been perfectly fine because I would have had almost no pec activation. So therefore no damage of that tendon and connective tissue going into the bone. So, or done a row variation, an inverted row or a single arm dumbbell row, which actually is a bit in combination I use a lot, is squat row, then bench and posterior chain. That's what I kind of deviated from. I was like, I wanted to make things interested in it. And so I didn't do the same split that I've done before. And it was my error. It wasn't a surface level error, but it's still one I shouldn't have made. And I'm glad I'm the one that suffered from it and not a client, which is actually a good reason why most trainers should do their own programs that they prescribe for other people, even if it's just to see how it feels.
Yeah.
Because I hurt myself, and it's going to prevent, because I've already made all the changes I need to make to keep that from happening to somebody else. And it really actually was a lucky week because we had the hurricane on Monday. And nobody really came in that Monday and Tuesday consecutively. So I'm the only one that really did the back-to-back workouts as they were originally written.
Yeah, that's one of many lessons to take from this, of what you just said. If you're a trainer, you need to do program, even if it's just, lighter weight one time through, just so you can feel it. Because I'll write out a program for someone and then I'll do it and I'll say, no, that's not enough activation because I'm trying to target something. That's not enough activation that way. Or conversely, that's too much activation. I don't like that. That's too much activation because it's going to aggravate. Like the kid I'm working with now has got some lumbar issues. So that's too much low back strain. I don't want to do that. Let me change that up. So and you should consider that yourself too. If you're just training yourself, is let me do a run through of this program, not the full working weight until, because I'll do that sometimes of like a recovery week or a rest week. Is I'll do what I'm going to do, but like 2 sets of 15 circuits. Whereas, the full program is going to be, like 4x8 or something like that.
Mhm.
So that is what I'll do sometimes. And partly because I sometimes work out in the garage, I sometimes work at a box gym. So one of the reasons I have to go through my program is because I have to figure out, is this going to flow,
Mhm.
with how the box gym is set up or how the crowd is at this particular time.
Mhm. Yeah, there's that, but also one of my pet peeves is when I see someone posting online, killed them today, post the workout, and they always give it a name. Gotta give it some crazy name, Alpha X workout or whatever. And I'm like, did you do that yourself? Because yeah, obviously that's gonna fucking kill somebody. You had them do 30 burpees and a bunch of deadlifts. You're lucky you didn't actually kill them. Uh, so I think a little perspective on how it feels to do it might provide a little empathy for your client when they're dying and you're like, come on, go, 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 go. And I'm
Right.
like, it's
And keeping in mind that you want to be appropriately uncomfortable, not
yeah,
dead, not in pain, not killing it.
yeah. Every once in a while, that's good, but as a test, but you want a progressive system. And if they're dying every time, to me, that screams they're not getting better. They're just dying. But then going forward, one of the springboards to my career was I was known as being very well about not injuring people, but also working around injuries. And so I started getting clients. And let me preface this with, this is not official training advice. Talk to your doctor and your therapist before you do anything if you have a pre-existing injury or illness. I'm just going to go through my own experience and people that I've worked with. And early on in my career, I had a kid and he was a lacrosse player. And they were in the weight room at the school doing 3-rep max push jerks overhead. And these are 16-year-old kids.
I want to push it. I want to push the jerk who decided to do that.
Yeah, we don't have the best professional relationship because I've gotten plenty of these kids from him. So, but this was the most extreme one. And they were doing these and he had a pre-existing shoulder injury before that, that he had a minor surgery on. So you're giving a kid that had a pre-existing shoulder issue, 3-rep max, push overhead jerk in a room of 100 kids that you can't watch everybody. And also in an environment where everybody is going to get the testosterone up and be doing more than they probably can.
Yep.
And he pushed it
Competitive
overhead.
meatheadness. Yeah.
He pushed it overhead and this whole part of his shoulder ended up down here.
Oh no.
Ended up down here. So the top, the humerus went all the way down. So he had to go in to have everything reattached. So I'm having one big giant muscle reattached. That might have stayed attached actually, because it could follow the line, but I don't know about that one. But he had basically Frankensteined his shoulder to get it back to a working condition. And it was actually quite a masterful job by whoever the orthopedic. I'm not going to name names here, but I think I know who it was. But his mother was already a client of mine, and one of his therapists was another client of mine. So I had two connections there, and they brought him in his sling, in his brace to keep everything going. They said, we want you to keep him in shape uh, but don't touch that shoulder.
Yeah.
Don't touch that shoulder. Like, don't worry, I won't. I wasn't going to. But again, so now consideration. So he's got this massive shoulder injury. Can't touch the shoulder. I can't have him hold a weight. I don't want to put a bar across his back. That's going to be putting load on that shoulder. I'm even hesitant to have him lay down on a bench and put pressure on that shoulder because it was complete damage. But there was a great Cressy article way back, and it was about that time. And the article was titled, "Just Rest is Never an Option." There's always something you can be working on, whether you're injured, whether it's after your season, whether you're whatever. And just rest is never an option. Work on the things you can so you come out of your injury still ahead of the game, or at least not as far back. And so I'm probably going to piss off my doctors, but this is Thursday. In my little sling, can't pick up anything with my right arm. And I did play with the weight because, again, bracing on the bench, this was the highest weight I could do without doing a total body contraction where my pec would be flexing. So
Is that why you're holding? Because it's lighter weight? Or do you always hold
yeah.
it?
So I lightened the weight and added a pause. So again, with good programming,
Mhm.
I'm looking to go into this whole situation without, first of all, without getting fat, because I eat like a pig. And so I'll have to adjust that too. So when we get on the nutrition end, I'm going to have to lower my calorie intake by probably about 1,000 calories a day, 800, 1,000 calories a day, not to 1,000 calories, but by 1,000 calories. So I'll be close to your standard 2,000 calorie diet. But so the things I added, so programmed for the day originally was deadlifts. So I switched that to the hip bridge. And then because I couldn't really push it as hard on the hip bridge because of the contraction against the bench, I added a double set to hit the glutes from just a different angle with the standing hip bridge, and then go into the old hip flexor stretch. Got to keep those hips mobile. And then set 2, this was actually already planned. Pistol squats. Yay, everybody's favorite kind of squats.
Ugh.
Yeah. But again, these are going to be my friends for the next at least 12 weeks because you don't have to hold weight. You just adjust the reps or the balance component, and those kind of
Or something I'll do is or the depth. If
Mhm.
if you're terrified of doing that because Samo is hardcore, just find something to sit down onto.
Yeah, a
that's
box or a
higher.
bench. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can work that down. Like the bench was a little too easy for me. So
Mhm.
I adjusted to the med ball, and then I'm going to work down to where I can go to where there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And then another double set, hit the glutes from another angle
Booty.
with some band scorpions there. And then nice little circuit, little offset lunge, just holding the weight across the shoulder. And I only did 5 here because I didn't want the video to be too long, but the rest of the workout were sets of 10. But offset lunges, and then we go into some single leg Romanian deadlifts, which if you don't have balance, obviously, like we've talked about, use the rack.
Mhm.
And this threw my balance off a little bit because that balance check with the arm, without having the arm, is a little bit difficult, but we'll get used to it. But again, the main point here is, yes, I have a major injury that's going to involve a lot of immobilization and then rehab for approximately about 6 months to get to normal activity. I can start lifting theoretically at about 12 weeks, but it'll be very, 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 very limited on resistance. But the main point is you can still do stuff. You don't get injured and say, oh crap, I have to sit, my 6-month rehab, I guess I'm not doing anything for 6 months except going to rehab. Just be smart about it.
This makes me think of something that I think is maybe, uh, it's probably more applicable to most people most of the time. Because I am, and I tend to train more desk jockey fatzos like me. And this is an example of where I am my own worst client, because I tell people all the time, because I work with so many deconditioned people, you're going to be sore, you're going to be uncomfortable, you're not going to want to do anything tomorrow. Do something, at least get out and walk,
Mhm.
because that's something, even if it's just going for a walk, is a lot better than the nothing of, I can't move.
Well, and this is also my beef with those trainers we were talking about earlier, is they'll post something like, crushed them with leg day today. They're not going to be able to walk tomorrow. Well,
That's not good.
if my leg workout destroys your legs so bad that you can't walk up the stairs at home, by 2 or 3 days of you not walking up the stairs at home, I've had a negative. A negative. Let me word this right. I want to say a negative caloric effect on you, but that actually means your baseline is lower, but a negative effect on your caloric output for those 3 days, because 3 days of walking up and down the stairs beats one leg workout every day or every time. And so if I do that to your legs and you cannot get up and walk around comfortably, so you're going to be more likely to sit down for a long time, or you can't do your gardening because I blew you up so bad. You can't do all these positive things for your health because of your workout. I've had a negative effect on your body.
Yeah.
All said and done. Yeah, maybe you could crush a squat better next time you come in, but everything else you do in your daily life sucks. So the effect we need to have in the gym is positive, lasting change without messing up your daily life. Now, when they're new, it's a little bit different because everything makes you sore. And so you do have to get past that initial phase. But even still, that's even more reason to mitigate intensity and volume in the beginning with somebody, instead of trying to impress them with crushing them with a workout. It's, hey, you know what? We're erring on the side of caution. You're going to be a little bit sore tomorrow, but you're going to be able to walk and you're going to be able to do all these things. Yeah, I know some other trainer is going to beat you up more than me, but I'm looking at the long term here.
You're probably not going to want to, but you're going to be
Yeah.
able to. So you need to have some level of activity.
Yeah. And at this point, I would rather you feel slightly wanting by the end of the day, the end of the workout, but still be able to do everything at home just fine.
Yeah.
And then communicate to me that it was a little not too much. And then we'll bump it up just a little bit next time. And we'll bump it up a little bit next time.
I don't remember who I first heard say this, but, and this is where, you know, we all need, everyone, even someone at your level needs to be reminded from time to time, form over ego. And not just in the, you know, that's when I believe when I first heard that, it was in reference to the, let's stack on 4 plates and like quarter rep it. Stop that. No, take the weights off, do a good rep to get good results. But that also applies to programming too, of form over ego. You don't want to kill yourself. You don't want to do something stupid just because it looks cool, or just because, you know, you like that intensity. If you can't move tomorrow, that's no good.
Well,
form over ego.
I did it to myself this time. I hit those 2 negative reps to be cool, which it set me back. So yeah, I did get benefit from those 2 had I not hurt myself the next day. But because of where I was, I needed to look ahead enough that, you know, I can see where most of my errors were. And there was a slight bit of randomness to it because of I wasn't expecting to have the extra workout partners, and, you know, the heat of the moment caused extra performance, I'm sure, on top of that. So there's a little bit of randomness, but there's enough that was in my control that we can look back and say, oh, okay, so this is how we make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. So the last thought I had on this, of the last takeaway I had for people on this is, when you were describing where the fault in your program was, is for anyone who's trying to teach themselves or trying to become a better trainer. Um, as I've said before, the first thing you told me was study anatomy.
Mhm.
Okay. And that if you can picture in your mind the muscle structure and the way the muscle fibers run, then even if you don't know an exercise or a thing, you should be able to figure it out just based on how the muscles move.
Mhm.
Okay. But then you taught me that the next step after that is, okay, now go below, go to the skeletal structure and
Mhm.
see how the skeleton is moving, see how the bones are moving. And that's where you get into not training muscle groups, but training movements. And then the thing I'm still working on, and that I think you kind of forget as you explained, is, but then the next level after that is putting them together.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the third
See,
level. But
seeing how
also,
those
yeah.
joints rotate and how those bones move, and then what they do to the muscle, or what the
Mm.
muscle is doing that's controlling that lever.
Well, and I had accounted for this at one point in my career, because the original strength phase for my program did the heavy ass chins on Monday, like I just did, with deadlifts. But then we did bench press again, but it was on Thursday. And so the original real fitness program was deads, chins, single arm press in one workout, overhead split squats or unilateral squats, could be split pistols, whatever. Then some conditioning, then a day off, and then it was bench, uh, weighted hip thrusts, and whatever accessories after that, and then bilateral squats on Friday. So that was the original one. And looking back, I remember knowing that I needed that break between doing the chins uh, and the even the deadlifts because of lat activation and the bench press coming up way down. So it was something I accounted for before and just I guess had a total brain fart because I was thinking of a specific thing, which is all these people's goals to get off of assisted pull-ups, and just that push pull going one day to the other, and total brain fart on it. So
Mhm.
again, it's that different level. Or again, I could have done a different grip, and gotten away with it. So there was the programming mess up. There was the intensity mess up doing the negative reps, and then the randomness of the extra intensity the next day with the different training partners. So all of these things played together to make it pop. And as a good trainer, you need to be able to account for all that. The more advanced your clientele gets. Now, in the beginning, though, you can train as simplistic as your knowledge base. So
Mhm.
if you don't know all of the nuance between the chin up grip versus the pull up grip yet, well, that's something you're going to accumulate over time because you can only get so much knowledge in your brain at once. But you can pick schemes that are more simplistic. Like nothing wrong with doing an upper lower split. Upper lower split would have solved all of that because I wouldn't have been hitting the same things back to back.
Mhm.
So stick with something basic, or squat, push, pull. 3 day split, squat, push, pull. You got 4 days to train, upper lower, break, upper lower. So there's nothing wrong with staying as simple as your knowledge uh, repertoire, and then expanding that as you learn more.
Yep. That is good advice to end on. Uh, something happy and positive and apolitical before we go into an annoying and infuriating health related topic, which is the COVID nonsense.
Yeah.
And where we're going to go here is and I specifically asked Sam, since he's really dug into these numbers and he can make more sense of them. So coming from the right, listening to lots of right leaning podcasts, I would say there are varying degrees of freak out over the infection and death numbers, the Delta variant, and what the vaccines are doing. And I think the kind of more extreme is that uh, the vaccines are making things worse. And setting aside the vaccine efficacy for the moment, my question to Sam was, are we worse off right now than we were this time last year? Is All right. So the question of the day is COVID worse now than it was this time last year? Because that's kind of the main talking point freak out from the commentators coming from the right.
Yeah, and so we kind of have to go back to, I guess, pathogen 101 on this,
Mhm.
because the big topic would be Delta, 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 right? And so we got to go back to the concept that it's a numbers game. So we're being barraged by pathogens every day. You
Yep.
know, you hear about a staph infection. Well, we have thousands of strands of staph on our skin
Yeah.
at any given time. It's, did you get exposed to one that your immune system wasn't used to, and did it replicate at a rate that your natural killer immune system couldn't handle at that time, or were you immunosuppressed for some other reason at that given moment
Yep.
to where you weren't responding to it, and it
That's a
replicated?
that's a really good example, and something people need to keep in mind with all the panic porn that's out there on in the news. So for instance, I work out a lot, I garden a lot, I'm outside a lot, and I have a pretty high pain tolerance. So I cut myself all the time and don't even notice. Okay. So I'm constantly getting cut up and scratched up and bruised up, and it almost never bothers me. I have gotten a staph infection one time, and it was a gnarly one because I got a really bad cut from the stupid cat across my palm, really bad deep cut across my palm. And I didn't have it wrapped up good enough. And I was at a public gym.
Yeah.
So I was introduced to a strain that my body couldn't fight off for whatever reason. And boom, it wasn't something new. It wasn't something exotic. It was something that happens all the time to me. But in this one instance, I ran into that thing I couldn't deal with.
Well, and side note, the number one, you know what the number one spreader of staph infection in a gym is?
Hmm.
Piece of equipment. What number one?
Oh, piece of equipment.
Yeah,
I don't know because I.
the neck roll, the neck pad. Because
Oh,
it's usually some material that will soak up sweat, and you put it on an exposed piece of your wrong arm, exposed piece of your skin here, which is your neck, even if you're wearing a shirt, and you load up the bar and it's grinding into your skin. So you got somebody else's sweat bacteria, which on that porous surface will live longer. The bacteria will live longer. Somebody else's sweat bacteria that they probably didn't clean off when they put it back in the stack of whatever gym you're at, and it's grinding into your skin as you're doing your sets. That's
or
the
you're
number.
doing this and you're rubbing your face because you're sweating all
Yeah,
over the
yeah,
place.
yeah, all of the above. So it's the number one way to get a staph infection in the gym. It's use that neck roll. So
That is something useful to remember for people.
don't be a little pea and use the neck roll. Just get some traps and make your own neck roll, and wash the bar before you do it. But the okay, so numbers game. So that was staph was a good example, because we have thousands of strands all the time, and it's, our bodies are used to it and they fight it off constantly, and it's this never-ending battle that's just going to exist, which is part of the border discussion, because skin is borders, and you need a porous but robust border here. Now let's take a virus that you breathe in, right? And it gets in your nasal cavity, gets in your throat, eventually gets in your lungs. And with COVID, where it becomes problematic is everybody talks about the lungs, but when it crosses the barrier to your bloodstream and becomes part of your plasma, that's where we're getting the systemic effects from, including the nasal pathway where it connects to the brain.
That's where you get that neuropathic pain that's
Yeah,
shooting into
yeah,
your
because
brain.
it's actually not very successful at going through the blood-brain barrier, but it is successful at going through the olfactory membrane. So the your body's constantly fighting it, and there's kind of like a border there in the membranes and the mucus, the membranes, and then getting to your bloodstream, and they're fighting along that border. And with the original COVID, you have a certain replication rate. So you get exposed to it and you breathe in enough that it starts replicating. It replicates at a certain rate, and your body's fighting it at a certain rate. And then eventually your body gets better at fighting it, and then you overcome the disease.
Mhm.
So I was talking to somebody about this one not that long ago, and they brought up, they've just made an offhand comment that I was like, that's perfect. For those of us in the 80s and 90s, if you remember this game, well, that little, I'm pointing at my screen. Why am I pointing at my screen? Let me circle that little fighter jet there, the space jet there, is your immune system. And these little things, pew, are COVID coming towards that plasma membrane, or the membrane to get past the plasma, and you go over and you shoot it. Pew, 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 pew. And if they start coming too fast for you and they get through, well, you lose points, and eventually you get infected, right? Well, as the game goes on, they get faster and faster and faster and faster, but you get better guns. You get the spread gun, and then you get two jets, and then you, all of these things. So that's your immune system getting better at it at the same time. So with original COVID, with a natural infection, if you made it through, then your system gets better and better and better at fighting it, and therefore you're less likely to get sick, and you need more and more and more and more exposure to get sick.
Mhm.
Now we enter late December and January of this last year, and we introduced a vaccine. Well, now you get the booster pack. You can buy the booster pack to get all the fancy spread guns and extra jets right away, even when it's still just the pew 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 little aliens coming in. So you can go ahead and get an enhancement right away that lets you fight it, right? So whether it's natural infection or through the vaccine, you're better able to handle these things coming down. Well, as the game goes on, they get faster and faster and faster, and that's where Delta comes in. Delta replicates 50% faster than the original and the Alpha variant and the Beta variant of COVID, which is what the vaccines were developed off of. And most people were infected with before. So it's replicating faster. So the viral load comes in at a higher rate. And that's where it becomes problematic, because there's two effects to that. First of all, you're more likely to get sick, even if you've had natural infection or vaccination. You're more likely to get sick, even if you're just relying on your natural immune system, because we've already proven we're not good at fighting it, even in its original form.
Right. Remember, that's why this is called a novel coronavirus,
because our body's never seen it.
There's however many dozens or hundreds or whatever of coronaviruses. And this is novel. It's also why you've talked about viral load.
And that viral load's key, because the replication versus the efficiency of your body fighting it is the equation. So those two colliding. If we clip this part for those the clip on the fitness, I have a torn pec. So that distracted me for a second. Okay, so the battle between the two, the efficiency of the immune system versus the replication of the virus is the battle. And when it's novel, this is less efficient, right? So this is less efficient, and it's getting better. And if you can get better before you die, you're good, right? Or if you get better before you have permanent damage, you'll be good. And we did okay, because if you really look at infection rate versus hospitalization versus death, we sucked compared to things we did know about, like flu and cold, which is a coronavirus, but the one we've seen before, or other airborne illnesses that we've been exposed to. We did worse. So originally it was about a 5% death rate, which is pretty damn high. Now we're looking at less than a 1% death rate, which is much better. So so we're getting better at it, but so that constant battle back and forth. Now the problem is now we have a variant that replicates faster. So if you're an original person that's never been exposed and never been vaccinated, it's replicating so fast that it's getting into that plasma like that.
It's like the little Galaga space aliens coming down.
It's like going to level 20 with the little level 1.
Yep.
With the little level 1.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
Yeah, you're going to be like going back and forth and not be able to fight it. So it's almost, Delta is almost a guaranteed you're going to at least get symptoms if you've never been vaccinated and never been exposed to the disease, unless you just have an amazing immune system, which is where when we start talking about kids, we go down that route because their natural killer cell count is far and above better than adults. The younger you are, the more that is, because your body hasn't had time to learn diseases. So we've got an evolutionary hack, or if you're a creationist, a creationary hack to that already, is you're good at fighting everything because you don't know what you're going to be exposed to in your environment yet, because that's always changing. But back to the adults, is if you go into it with this against this, it just replicates so fast. So you're going to get sick faster, you're going to get more sick, and you're going to be more likely to have to go to a hospital, be more likely to have long haul, be more likely to die. So yes, in that situation, it has gotten worse.
So that is, well, before I move things along here, I do want to go off on a very quick tangent here, because you mentioned long haul. Another thing that's important to remember, kind of like our analogy with staph infections, is every virus has long haul. The problem with this one is it's novel. We don't know what the long haul symptoms are or how prevalent they are. You can have long haul symptoms from a bad case of the flu, okay? Mm-hmm. But we know what they are, and our bodies are used to fighting it, so it's pretty rare.
Well, as we went through, when I talked about my long haul in the previous episode, I don't remember the number, that we do know a lot of the mechanisms now, which is very encouraging. It's very encouraging, and they're able to treat them to some degree.
CAT. So that's why the Delta variant is so concerning,
because it replicates faster.
So are we worse off now than we were a year ago?
Yes and no.
Okay. And that was my gut instinct listening to these right commentators kind of freaking out, is I'm betting it's more complicated than that.
And it is. So the replication rate is faster. So someone who has no immunity at all is almost guaranteed to get jacked up by it. Okay, so which is where the message that I think people might confuse on us is, if you have no immunity, get some somehow, right? Mm-hmm. And we do have vaccines available. Whether they're the best choice or not, which one is the best choice, we're not even going to get into right now. But with the Delta variant, you're more likely to get very sick if you have no immunity. Now, if you have some immunity via vaccine or natural immunity, you're more likely to get sick, because you got the fancy weapons firing, but they're also coming at a faster rate. But we also know that even if they do make you symptomatic and sick, because the immunity boost that you get from natural or from vaccine is so good, and our bodies are so good at adapting to this, is you're able to fight it off in a way that you're at least not getting very sick. So both of those are beneficial for that. Now, where we can get on the make it worse side is those of us that have some immunity and can fight it off can be carrying a high viral load without being floored by it. So we can be carrying that higher load because our immune system's so much better, that they're fighting and sitting there in that nasal cavity in the throat, and we think we got allergies. Whereas
I went for a test a couple weeks ago because I had several in my extended family, several people who they thought they had just bad, because my family, there's a lot of seasonal allergies in my family. So they thought they just had a bad case of seasonal allergies because it's about that time of year, or maybe a sinus infection. And then someone said, you should probably go get tested for COVID just in case. Turned out that's what it was. and it manifested
Turns out
as,
it was the sinus.
yeah, as
And-
bad seasonal allergy sinus infections because it's similar symptoms. I mean, it is a respiratory through the
Mhm.
through the sinus cavity thing. So that's how it manifested.
And so the main point is that yes, it's we're better off is because over 50% of the country is vaccinated and a large portion is also naturally infected.
I think it's up to something like 77% now of
Yeah, they're saying it's
some
around
kind
80,
of immunity.
80% herd immunity. Yeah.
Yeah. So either from one dose or multiple doses or previous infection.
Or previous infection. So we're having better outcomes. Like I said, the death rate is much lower now. Now the death rate, if you separate never infected and never vaccinated, is higher. So again, some sort of immunity is best, especially as these things seem to be progressing in the negative direction where they're replicating faster. So the outcomes is a little bit better because of vaccination and because of the fact that we've already experienced some herd immunity through natural. The negative part though, the bad part is the super spreader event is people that don't know they're sick. If you're an unvaccinated, never been naturally infected person, you're going to end up staying home because you're going to get so sick or going to the hospital. You're going to get so sick that you can't spread it because you can't function, right?
If you think it's just allergies, how many of those people walking around thinking it's a sinus infection or it's allergies? I deal with this once or twice every year myself.
Mhm.
You know, so if it had been me, how much would I have been walking around, going to the gym, whatever? I'm just going to take some Dayquil. I'm going to take some Benadryl, whatever, deal with these symptoms. Because that's what I do once or twice a year. I get one of these obnoxious things.
And viral load is key because even if we want to go down the mask route, if I have enough viral load that I'm sitting there in that sinus infection realm where that same viral load will put somebody in the hospital who's never been infected, right? So that also affects my viral output. And if masks reduce, they're reducing from a higher number. And so the mask debate is, well, we're still out there. We're still dealing with this thing because normal output with alpha 100, output with delta 150, we said 50% more, right? But masks reduce 20%, right? So now I'm 120 versus 70 because of the mask. So, or 80, excuse me. So it's, I'm still pumping out more than that same situation a long time ago. We're still pumping viral load into the environment. So we can shelve the mask argument and say, well, again, wear it if you're comfortable, wear it in certain situations, and it reduces, but it doesn't prevent. And then,
so let me play a little devil's advocate here, and talk about the numbers. So the numbers I've been hearing, if I'm gonna make myself a right-wing commentator, yes, the percentages of serious or death cases is getting better, but the overall number of infected is going up, and the raw number of death is higher this August than it was last August. So something's wrong.
Wait.
Yes or no?
let me check the raw number of deaths.
Of course, probably both, because everything's more complicated than
Yeah.
it should be.
Let's see if this gives us what we want to see here. Load. Did you say last August?
Yeah, August to
July.
August.
July. Come on, click over.
And the reason I use August is because we kind of had a spike here,
Yeah.
and
Well, you can
and-
see the curve. You can see the curve.
and that's one of the frustrating things when I've tried to look on my own of the state by state numbers, is the ones I've been finding are showing you cumulative numbers. Well, cumulative numbers don't mean anything when, as we started this discussion, what we're talking about here is delta, because that's the concern.
Mhm.
So what we
Well,
want
and
to
that's
compare is
that's
just
one of
the
the
last
big
few
stinks
months.
with the CDC numbers of 99% of hospitalizations are unvaccinated. Well, they're counting from January 1st on.
Yeah.
And there's a significant difference of how many people were vaccinated after that date
Yeah, I
versus now.
thought
So,
I thought the major vaccination push started to happen in March.
well,
Am I remembering correctly?
the politicians were getting it at the end of December.
Okay.
Healthcare workers were getting it right there, end of December, early January.
Yeah.
And then it was available to the public around May 1st. And remember, that's when the CDC stopped tracking breakthrough infections unless it was hospitalization.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that could skew the data, but yeah, the death rate is higher than last August if we look at those curves, right? Nowhere near what it was in January, but still higher than last August. It's back here. Okay. So yes, your statement about death rates is higher, but yeah, again, it's a numbers game. Well, it's a numbers when it comes to the viral load game. And so if I'm someone, being myself, who's been naturally infected before, and I get a stuffy nose that happens to be COVID, and I go to the store, again, mask or no mask, I'm pumping out a high viral load to everybody around me. And if I come across some people who've never been exposed and never been vaccinated, I'm the one putting them in the hospital, not the other way around.
Which is important to remember, because what's coming from in this politicized world, I mean, it's the Democrat Party, the Biden administration. What's coming from them is that the most recent spike has been a spike of the unvaccinated.
Okay, so I can make two statements and still be consistent, even though they're fighting back and forth. The spike in deaths is among the unvaccinated and hospitalizations. The spike or the spread of the disease is most likely the people that are spreading it without knowing it, because they have a high viral load without
Because they
getting
have some
sick.
degree of immunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could, those two arguments are being pitted against each other. You can make both statements and still be consistent. The spike in hospitalization and death is the unvaccinated. The spike in spread is probably against the people who have accumulated immunity, but whether vaccine or natural immunity. So I'm the spreader. You know, someone else vaccinated is a spreader. And again, it's a numbers game. I could have a high load without ever showing a single symptom, versus someone who has the same load will be sick if they are unvaccinated or never had infected.
That's what I had on the COVID numbers. Do you want to get into the vaccine stuff or not today?
I kind of want to maybe talk a little bit about the guidance with the kids. I think we can probably go that direction, because
Okay.
it's all about the nuance of the argument. So this is an article by a guy named David Zweig. I think I heard it pronounced as Swag, but it's titled "The CDC Owes Parents Better Messaging on the Vaccine for Kids."
That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's an apolitical article, but I guess depending on who you agree with, you'll hate him either way. He's one of those that's in the middle, but it's a pretty good rundown, and I'll link it in the description. But the main thing is the binary messaging from the CDC, the all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Messaging, and then again, as we keep talking about over and over and over again, the skewing of statistics. And the main takeaway here was we're looking at 12 to 17-year-olds, and they combined male and female with the numbers on myocarditis, which is it's correctable, but it's also quite serious, and it can kill you or cause permanent damage. It's inflammation of the heart tissue, and pericarditis is the tissue around the heart. And the way, first of all, they used some mathematical models, again, making assumptions, which ended up, compared to real world data, being completely off, not even close. And then combining the males and females, which males are 7 times more likely to come down with the condition. So if you're trying to make an informed decision for your child and they're a young female with pre-existing conditions, well, maybe vaccine's the best way to go, because hospitalizations are going to be up with pre-existing conditions, and COVID is definitely worse. But if you have a young male who's otherwise healthy, then they're now 7 times more likely. So that changes the dynamic of it. So they're otherwise healthy, so they're not likely to be hospitalized even from COVID, but from the vaccine, they're 7 times more likely to develop the condition. I might make a different decision for my child. And so that's kind of the gist of the article. And he cites the CDC's own data on a lot of this, including this one here, which is the hospitalization rate among children with COVID, and how it's a skewed data point because they list the total per 100,000, but they fail to make the point that they have in their own data sheet that about 40+% of them were in the hospital for other reasons, but they just happened to test positive for COVID because everybody's testing you when you come in the door now. So they weren't in the hospital for COVID, they were in the hospital and happened to have COVID. So that, amongst other data sheets that he links there. So it's a really good summary of a lot of the things we've been talking about, of how the conversation has been basically just been pushed into the direction of everybody needs to get this no matter what. Same thing we talked about when I compared the reinfection rates of people who have naturally had COVID with the increase in adverse effects. So what's my benefit versus the increase in benefit?
Yeah, and kind of what we talked about then is just getting worse. So I had to step away from a group chat that I'm in because I have a friend who is just militantly, for lack of a better word, militantly vax, and it's not just that he's militantly vax and everybody should get vaccinated, by golly. It's the way he belittles and excoriates anyone who is even marginally hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
And if your goal is to help people make informed choices, to be healthy, to save their lives by your own admissions, why can't you just be truthful? As we said then, why in the world is the administration and the Democrats especially, but then just the normal people who are so militantly pro COVID vaccination, why are they trying to portray the vaccine as some perfect panacea? Just tell the numbers. The numbers as they are good, but because the powers that be have portrayed this as something perfect and ignored, frankly, flat out lied about or excoriated people who have had questions. Last time I brought up the local Fox Houston journalist reporter who was fired because she was trying to do a story on this kid who died from a heart complication 3 days after getting the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just say, look, this is tragic. Here are what the numbers are. Here are our recommendations. This is what the positives are. This is what your benefit is if you do get the vaccination. And instead of, this Nicki Minaj nonsense, what she's saying may be BS. Person who I made me step away from this conversation. What she is saying may be BS in her "my cousin has a friend" story, but her fears aren't BS. There is a concern of not with impotence with men, but with infertility in girls and young women with this vaccine.
Mhm.
Why aren't we allowed to talk about that? Why aren't we allowed to ask these questions?
Well, and that one was the infertility was based on some of the rat studies,
Mhm.
early rat studies, and it did make them infertile to a high degree. But the fact is, it was never repeated in primates or humans. And with the real world data, well, how long have we been having the vaccine? For 9 months now.
Yeah.
And at a large scale, it's a sliding scale as to the degree to which we have. So we don't know. The only study we have is what's happening in the real world now, which is not the best way to do studies, but uh, we don't know what the percentage is going to be, because how many people are trying to have kids, how many people are randomly doing things that would make them have kids, uh, versus what the numbers were before the vaccine. It's
I don't want to name names because I can't remember exactly who it was because I heard it from a couple different people. I was getting caught up on the news. There are no long-term studies which show. Oh, hold on a second. That is a bald-faced lie of omission because there can't be long-term studies because we've only been giving out this
Mhm.
vaccine this year. There can be no long-term studies. Even the long haul effects, there can be no long-term studies because we've only been dealing with the virus for a little over a year. Why is this so maddening?
Well, and it's a perspective thing. I can look at it from this angle or from this
Mhm,
angle. So
mhm, mhm.
you could look at the infertility and say, well, it was only rat studies. That's not like it's going to be in humans. Or you can look at it and say, well, this happened in rats. We need to make sure it's not going to happen in humans. And for those that have used any kind of cosmetics in the last 100 and something years, those animal studies are why we don't burn our face off, right, when we put
Mhm.
on a mascara or a blush. And for all, side note, for all those people that buy the brands that say no animal studies, guess what, they're piggybacking off all the other companies' animal studies. They just don't
Mhm.
do them themselves.
Mhm.
So they're using the same technology. Animal studies are why we don't die for a lot of reasons. Uh, so when you're looking at it from that perspective, is this happened in rats? No, we're not the same as rats, but we're similar. We're mammals. This could happen in us, maybe, if such and such XYZ mechanism
Yeah.
happens. We need to make sure before we release this on the public, we didn't get that benefit. That's why these things take so long, and why they're not good for emergency use, because
Mhm.
uh, there is a process that you need to go through
And for
with
good
testing
reason.
for these things. Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't release something with a lot of I don't knows on a mass population unless there's something else behind it. Which again, I don't think we have to be too nefarious in this and just say follow the money.
Yeah.
Pfizer's just making a shit ton of money on all this.
But follow the money and also follow the fear. The panic porn in the media, from the beginning, this became political, and the people who wanted to push one side or another, and it's flipped. I've been lambasting the Biden administration, the Dems, because that's who it is now. But there was panic porn early on
Mhm.
from the right and the Trump administration that was a little to a lot over the top, depending on which
Mhm.
source you're talking about, rather than just, okay, what are the facts? What do we know? What do we not know? And again, why are we not allowed to talk about this? Because there
Well,
there are legitimate concerns to the vaccine, uh, because it didn't follow this normal process. And it's, yes, there are people who are lunatics out there. There were people who were anti-vax lunatics before we'd ever heard of coronavirus. The
Well,
majority of the population.
let's do simple math. All right. So I'm a male, 41 years old. So the numbers are 40 and under, but I'm close enough to be in on this. I've had natural infection. The numbers per real world data is about 1 in 1,000 reinfection rate. That equates to a 99.9% effectiveness of the natural vaccine. Now, obviously, you don't want to go through the natural disease, but for those of us that have already done it, we can use those numbers, right? So 99.9% effective. The myocarditis outcome of the vaccine is about 0.2% in 40 and under males. Okay, so, excuse me, 0.1% on the first dose, 0.2% on the second dose. So a total of 0.3%. So I'm taking a 0.3%, 3 out of 1,000 chance of developing a severe heart condition that can be reversed, but could also still have permanent damage or kill you if you don't catch it in time, or at least put you in the hospital for a while. So I could clog up the system with a 0.3% chance, or I could just keep what I have and have a 0.1% chance of
And
not
I
clogging
have
up
to
the
think
system.
that's a hell of a lot higher than 0.3% for someone like you who has a pre-existing heart condition.
Well, that would be speculation though, and I would like to keep the conversation to just hard numbers.
yeah.
So what we know versus speculating, you know, again, where are the body's the assumptions, right?
Why do we have to speculate has been my point, because
Mhm.
like this poor kid in Texas who was, I think he was like 16 years old. He probably speculatively, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but common sense, my best guess would be he had an undiagnosed congenital defect of some sort. Why don't we know?
Well,
And for anyone who,
that's the actually big stink about the myocarditis
yes,
argument is it's showing up more in healthy young people than it is in people with pre-existing conditions.
mhm. And for anyone who's never experienced this or knows how the drug approval process goes, heart complications are a killer, not just in humans, but for your drug. If there are heart complications, that's the quickest way to get your drug squashed.
Mhm.
Because and I've had this conversation with doctors
Well, because
who
heart
are
disease is still the #1 killer, even with
exactly.
COVID and et cetera. And how
So
many of those COVID cases were heart related
there
that
are
died?
there are there are drugs that I could be on that could help me with my inflammation and chronic pain, but it was discovered that they cause heart problems, and so they were banned. Period. The end. There's no, well, I don't have a family history. I personally have never had to deal with, so I'm willing to take the risk. No, they're gone. They're off the market because that's how seriously heart conditions are treated. Why aren't we treating it seriously with this? It is not insane to have concerns and hesitancy and ask these questions. Not only is it's not insane, it's if you are in a position to answer these questions, you're obligated to, quite frankly. That's what's so infuriating about our so-called health experts that we see in the media and who are in charge of a lot of this stuff is you're obligated to answer these questions. Why aren't you? Instead of just pretending that everything's fine. It's one thing to say everything is mostly fine. This is a very small percentage. It's highly unlikely. It's another thing to say everything's fine. There are no long-term studies, even though I know there can't be any long-term studies because this hasn't gone on long enough.
Well, it's the messaging from the beginning. And we can go way back to, again, the Trump administration, to lest we be accused of being right-wing conspiracy theorists. You brought this up, and I guess I wasn't clear in past episodes, is the thing that clouds all of this is the fact that we could not have an emergency use authorization without, if there was an existing treatment plan for the disease that was effective. So the vaccine is emergency use is only possible if we can't treat the damn thing. And what did we see in the early stages of this? So this was published in,
and you'd brought that up and I had completely forgotten about it. And I heard someone else say it last week and I went, what?
Yeah, so this is from the journal publication was April. So this is really, so taking the time to get the data and write a paper and then get it published would be, so this started way before April. So we're looking at the early days of the pandemic. And this is clinical outcomes of early ambulatory multi-drug therapy for high-risk SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 infection. So remember the recent Joe Rogan stuff where they threw the kitchen sink at everything and he came out of it just fine?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what they were doing right in the beginning. I think this is even out of McKinney, Texas. And so you saw a little bit of zinc HCQ and the drug not to be named because apparently it's a horse drug that won Nobel Prizes
even though it was
in
called a
2015.
miracle drug and won a Nobel Prize and is
I saw a meme
prescribed to
the other
hundreds of
day
millions
that
of
I think
people.
should be the motto is if you've been finessed into calling the drug that got the Nobel Prize in 2015 for its use as humans as the horse pill, then you should just sit the next few plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got those thrown at it, plus a lot of over-the-counter medications, plus vitamins. And if you look through these numbers, you're looking at about an 85% success rate in preventing hospitalization or serious disease, including death. So 6 out of the 922 ended up hospitalized, and 1 out of the 922 ended up passing away with these treatments versus the control of no treatment. So you're looking at an 85% success rate. And these treatments had to have been with the February start of everything. But yet all of this was stopped.
Yeah.
Every bit of this was stopped. Every bit of funding to further research this was stopped.
This is very suggestive is the best we can say about this, because it's a small sample size over a small period of time.
Well, there wasn't much sample size back then because we were just getting the virus.
Exactly. In a normal, rational, pre-insane, in a 9/10/2001 world, this would have led to a larger study, so that, because that was published in December 2020. So theoretically, we could have had, because the way this typically, oh, hey, this is an interesting study. These are interesting results. Let's start working on something bigger while we're working on this paper. We could have had a paper published this summer before the Delta spike that said, here's a bigger, more conclusive study on these treatments. How many lives could have been saved?
Or not only that, but hey, this seems to work and we got nothing better at the moment. Let's just keep doing this. Until we find something better. And every bit of it was halted right about the time Operation Warp Speed started.
And I have yet to hear anyone certainly specifically directly ask someone in charge this question. I haven't even heard a commentator just ask the question rhetorically. Why are these vaccines, all these people pushing the vaccine, why are these vaccines even still on the market? Because per the law, their emergency use should be
with the FDA approval. Because
not just the FDA approval, but also we have treatments. They're being downplayed. They're being called horse paste, whatever. We have documented treatments.
But they're not FDA approved for the treatment of COVID-19.
And yet the government itself, the federal government itself, is pushing out the monoclonal antibodies.
Well,
curious.
Well, it was until DeSantis said he was on board, and then they.
Well, no, they're still pushing it out, but now they're basing the distribution on equity.
Yes. So there's probably a threshold that they say it works to this degree, so it's not quite good enough. I don't know enough about that.
We would need a legal expert to look at the law and say what exactly are the triggers for this emergency use.
Well, and so we're talking about adult conversations on the topic. I'm lucky to be married to an adult who also happens to be a doctor, and we were talking about our son because he turns 12 this year, right? And the emergency use is approved 12 and over on whether he should be vaccinated or not. And we ultimately, after quite an extensive conversation, decided, well, first we're going to go get him tested for antibodies, see if he doesn't already have a natural exposure immunity, which could have shown up as it did in children early on
Now,
as
that
that sinus infection or that.
does that show up in one of the standard tests, or is there a specific test for antibodies? Because I think that's something a lot of people should
No,
consider.
you wouldn't do the swab, you do a blood test.
Okay, that
So
has to be a blood test.
It's a blood test. So you're seeing
it's-
if it's in your system.
It doesn't come from the nasal swab or the spit test. It has to be a
No,
blood test.
that's the virus itself they're testing for there.
Okay.
And then the other thing is that I've included now that we've had this FDA approval is I'm not going to do it unless it's community. Because if I'm going to inject my son with something, then there's going to be some liability on the other side of that injection.
Mhm.
This, as we talked about with the bait and switch on the names, is if you go get the Pfizer as it is right now, you are still getting the EAU approved with no liability at all. With community, the company has skin in the game. And that's probably the enhancement of the codons probably made it better. So not only am I doing the math and having a better chance of getting the better product for my son, but also if it's not a good product, then they're going to freaking pay because of forcing this on us.
And it's not just about, I'm going to get that sucker because he shot Jesse Ventura. I mean, because, you know, my child got sick after this vaccine. No, it's the potential of liability forces the company and the people working on it, consciously or unconsciously, to be more thorough.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a consequence to not. If there are no consequences, I've mentioned this before, people who have full insurance, have like a really good full insurance, they drive more recklessly than people who don't. If you just have liability, you statistically, you drive more carefully than people who have full insurance because you're not as worried about the consequences.
Mm-hmm. Again, but it's a nuanced approach at the same time. Could he be actually already naturally immune? And as a child, that's going to have a longer effect on you. So, okay. So again, skewing of data when they're talking about the vaccine wearing off, who were the most vaccinated population in the beginning? Old people.
Mm-hmm.
Whose immune system doesn't adapt as well? Old people. So you get the injection, your immune system creates the antibodies. Once the antibodies are gone, they're gone. Someone my age, get the injection, antibodies produced, T cell, B cell memory starts forming, creates a system of a network of defense, creates more of those little ships that are ready to go. They're not out there all the time because that's what the antibodies are, but they're ready to go whenever we need them. Someone Ben's age, get the injection, get the antibodies, a crap ton of ships are made because he's young. His immune system is in that point of adaptation. The things that the human body gets better at things over time, but then you get to be an adult and it says, oh, I've gotten good at my environment. The problem is
I have gotten good at my environment. I have spread my seed. I am done.
Exactly. And then, but if the environment changes when we're older, well, all of those nice little things that say, hey, I'm good at getting better at this are done. They're already gone. They get a little better at our age. But then once you're 70 or 80 years old, they're like, I'm kind of done with this. I'm metabolically just trying to stay walking and alive.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a good place to wrap up this particular COVID discussion before I say things that get us banned. Not that I would be too sad about that because no one watches this crap anyway.
Again, we're still at the happy point of under the radar right now.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, the moral of the story is, for crying out loud, stop vilifying people who are hesitant or have questions or disagree with you, as we've been saying all along. And when it comes to COVID specifically, do your due diligence, think about it, and then ask an expert. And more importantly, you should be asking your doctor specific questions. You should be having an adult conversation with your doctor and asking specific questions that you have about the vaccine or about the virus. And they should be able to answer those questions, or at least tell you, I'm not sure. Let me do some research and get back to you. If they just give you the get vaccinated line, or if they're on the other extreme, which I find hard to believe, but if they're on the other extreme of, this is Bill Gates injecting 5G into you, go find another doctor.
well, and arm yourself with knowledge, because
Yeah.
you need it. This is where it gets tough, because we do put with just the label of expert on a pedestal, and whether that's your doctor or the guy on TV or whatever, we put it on a pedestal because we don't have, whether, like you always call it, the witchcraft, right? Explain the witchcraft or whatever, because to some people it looks like that. If you don't have a mind for, the molecular biology or virology or whatever, you're probably an accountant, or you're probably an engineer, or you're probably doing something else for a living. And so you have to put some trust in somebody who
Yeah.
has that mind. The problem is, so many people who have those minds are walking a tightrope themselves. In fact, go back to that Zwei article. He has a source when they're talking about the cardiology, when the CDC makes the statement that cardiologists are behind this, but he brings up, here's a source here, that there's a huge body of cardiologists that are saying, no, this is completely the wrong message. But then after that, he has to talk about major university hospitals where they can't talk. They're not allowed to say this out loud. So we're in an environment where your doctor has to toe a certain line in certain places, in certain environments. So it really is, arm yourself with knowledge. Don't just have it as a Facebook post, but actually start learning to be able to dig in to the numbers, and say, and at least be able to say, hey, I saw this, doc, what do you say about it? And give me a detailed answer. Not just, oh, that's hogwash.
That's a good point, and it is infuriating that we have to be careful that even our experts, it's more than just giving you the party line one way or another. You might run into someone who won't give you an answer or can't give you an answer. So along with the hardcore party line without details, without, actually addressing and answering your question, you might run into someone who tries to weasel their way out of and around without actually answering the question.
And this is just good advice for medical treatment in general. The surgery I have coming up, we had a long talk, and I made my doctor sit down with me for more than 5 minutes, to talk about, okay, well, I have congenital heart disease. What about alcohol consumption? What about XYZ vitamin that I'm taking for this? Do I need to stop this? Do I need to go through this? Do I need to get an extra test done, an extra EKG done before we go into this? Is this general anesthetic versus local anesthetic? So all of those questions you have to be equipped to ask. And those of us with special considerations, like I've had since I was a child, are used to it. But with this whole COVID thing, the general public needs to learn it. You need to learn to be able to go in and talk to your doctor about anything along those lines that might coincide with something else in your life. I got a good example of this. I had a client a baseball player. He had Lyme disease, and he also had a severe mold allergy. So he went to the Lyme doctor, and they were doing their treatments. He went to the doctor for his mold allergies, and they took blood to create a serum, basically, to help with his
I
with
forgot
his
about this. Yeah.
with his allergy. And then he went back to the Lyme doctor, went through that whole process, and in the course of that, they were actually able to clear the Lyme, which is hard and difficult to do. And he was able to make it through. And then timeline goes to now he goes back to the mold allergy doctor, and they make the serum from his blood, and they re-inject him to help with mold allergy, but they also re-injected the Lyme. And so he had a second infection of the Lyme because the communication between the two doctors and him, he needed to know to tell the doctor that was dealing with the mold allergy, hey, I can't have that blood re-injected into me. And that's the system we're in because of HIPAA laws and communication laws between doctors. And so we have to be informed patients first and foremost, because we're number one in charge of our body. We rely on experts to take care of the nuts and bolts of it, but we're number one frontline defense of our own bodies. So COVID has forced us to all be informed about our health. And again, whether it's the numbers game that we talked about with infection versus risk, or if it's maybe I have these conditions, we have to be able to have that talk.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it here and bid people farewell. And once again, encourage you to not be a dick.
Yes, don't be a dick. Now, tease for next time. I guess we'll do the FBI and the government agencies. We'll call it the government agencies episode. So I'll put together all the CDC and Bureau of Justice stuff together, and you work on the other. And that's going to be a fun one because it's been something that makes me want to punch my computer screen every time I look into it.
And is one of those things where people across the spectrum, and unless you're in that 7-8% of idiots, we should all be able to come together on this, and we're not.
And we should demand better. We should demand better, really.
We should have been demanding better, and we're not, and we haven't. So that's what we're going to work on next time.
Benefit of the doubt, for the last 15 years, nobody knew to demand better until it all exploded. So,
but now we should know better.
Now we should know better. All right.
Buckle up, people.
Buckle up. I'll see you next time.
Next time.